I love that you're seeing obviously more than double win rates, but were there any sort of gotchas or was there resistance initially from your internal teams, particularly sellers?
I'd love to say, yeah, it was easy. Yeah, no, we had no problems. But that would be the biggest lie in the world. And I think the big thing I learned was like, you got to map out the workflow first and foremost. Get the workflow, the process nailed down. Try and test some of that if you can before you try and put the system in. I think we tried to do it the other way around. So that lost us a bit of time, but I think we got there in the end.
This is Revenue Makers, the podcast by 6 Sense, investigating successful revenue strategies that pushed companies ahead. Hey, Adam.
Yes.
Who are we talking to today?
Well, we've got, I always say great guest. I'm not going to say, it's all I could ever say because we do really have amazing guests. Alex Olley, who is the founder and CRO of Reachdesk and has a really interesting perspective on things as a founder, as a sales leader. And we're going to talk to him about some big stakes that he's put on the ground for 2024.
Love it. And not just that, he's going to talk about how he was able to more than double win rates for his company, which who doesn't want to learn more about that?
I'll sign up for that.
And then as a CRO, how he actually recognizes that marketing is driving 80% of the buyer's journey. So unique perspective. And by the way, did we mention he's a lawyer?
Amazing. Just to have a sales leader with that perspective, talking about transitioning to working in market accounts and the relationship with marketing and sales. Just some really good conversation. I think some really good actionable insights for the audience. So you ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
Alex, thanks so much for joining us. Really excited to have you on the show today. Before we dive in, we talked about you, but give us the who you are story and what you're up to these days.
The who you are story, it could be a long one. I'll give you the short version.
We do have 40 minutes, Alex.
Okay, fine. I'll give you the medium version then. I've been a founder of a business. It's the first company I've founded. So I'm currently the CRO and co-founder of Reachdesk. I've been building that for 5.5 years now. God, that feels like a long time. We're an all-bound engagement platform. So we help companies really connect with their prospects and their customers using direct mail and gifting and integrating that within their existing workflow and connecting it to their tech stack so you can measure the ROI. But yeah, I've been in B2B SaaS for the best part of 14 years now. And 2 of the companies I joined IPO'd, 1 other exit. So if I can do either of those at Reachdesk, I'll be very happy.
I think the impetus for our conversation is earlier this year, you put something on LinkedIn that was pretty like, I'd say bold, but it was like just putting it out there like, this is what we're going to do this year, kind of your big bets and where you're focused and all that. So it's encouraging to see and it's refreshing to see just, a leader to say like, this is where we're going to throw down. So I just kind of wanted to start from there. Like, where do those come from? What sort of inspired you to just put it all out there? And we can maybe dive into the individual ones. I would love to tell us what inspired you just to do it.
I don't think anything inspired me to do it. In fact, I'd probably get into more trouble than it's worth because my marketing team were like, what? We literally just agreed that. Now you're telling like our competitors are going to see. I'm like, don't worry. It'll be fine. I just like to share. I'm not like a building in public guy. There are some people that are like, we're going clear and they're going to share everything. I'm not brave enough to do that because there's a lot of bad stuff that happens that maybe I'm not willing to share and stuff that may be confidential. But I do that mainly so that I can sometimes just like brain dump and get people's feedback. Most of the time it's like, oh, that makes sense. Let's talk about that. And sometimes actually it starts conversations. But I think the post you're probably referring to is the one where I was like, look, in 2024, these are the big things that for us at Reachdesk we're focusing on. And I think the 3 big things I referred to was like product tours. So I believe that the best prospects will have seen a demo of our product. They'll probably be quite familiar with Reachdesk before they buy from us or before they even speak to a salesperson. So I just want that to be everywhere so that people can go, oh, I was looking into products. Maybe I'm not a good fit for that company, or maybe, had no idea Reachdesk has like an events product or like analytics. They might find new stuff. So big believer in that and like helping companies buy rather than just selling. Huge one, which I'm sure captured your attention, of focusing on in-market. I believe the best accounts are the ones that are really showing that intent that you can match signals to and then really power forward with your go-to-market motion by not selling to cold accounts and really focusing on those ones that are in buying stage. And then the other bit I was really referring to was around like events. Now, I'm going to be very honest, and I've offended quite a few people by saying this recently. So I was like, I don't want to go to another really bang average, boring dinner in the same hotel that I've been to with 5 other providers with the same food. I feel like all these roundtable dinners and like dinner events have just been done the same. We're going to do different events. We're going to do things that people will remember And I'm going to share something which I hope my team don't hate me for, but one of our big value propositions is things are like broken and that we can help fix it. So why wouldn't we get CMOs to do like a pottery class drinking champagne to like fix the stuff that's broken that they're going to remember, and it's something new that they've done. So we want to be like the Carlsberg of events, like the really, really good, set the bar high, but it doesn't have to be crazy expensive to give something new to people. So those are three things that I'm really keen on accomplishing. Let's see if we nail them this year.
Love it. I think sometimes it is obviously a little bit daunting to put it out there, but it also brings a clarity, like 3 focus areas for the year. Like the team can rally behind that and do it. So I applaud you for it. You were right. The one that did catch our attention was the fact that in-market accounts are really where you want to focus. And I heard that you doubled your win rate last year by adjusting the go-to-market motion to really focus on in-market. So my question to you is, what does in-market mean to you? And then what was your playbook? Because that is not an easy transition to make. And a lot of companies recognize that they should be moving that way, but the thinking about it and then doing it are 2 very different things. So it's a big question, but love to hear your thoughts.
This is like years of me trying to figure this out. I'd say I started testing the waters with what I would call account-based marketing about 8-9 years ago. And I can't remember where I heard it, but I remember someone talking about this concept, really focusing on these warm accounts and like trying to just really prioritize those. And I was like, how do you do that? And the way I thought about it then was choosing those accounts wisely, mapping your ICP, serving ads to them, and then seeing engagement. But that's all I could really achieve. And for years and years, I was like, I need to find a way to make sure that we are prioritizing the accounts that are showing the best signals to us. Because I believe that if you get them at the right time, as we all know, your ability to win is far higher. But it wasn't until January that we started using Sixth Sense that actually allowed us to like really get that into our motion. You know, we're fairly sizable sales team with BDRs, AEs, account managers, scaling to like systematize that. That's really, really hard. So the philosophy actually for us at Reachdesk, we have this first to the party mindset. The way I used to think about it was like, okay, maybe someone submitted a demo request, right? For marketing, that was like your gold standard. Demo requests, really high intent. We're now speaking to them. And I started realizing that the buyer journey had changed drastically. And we were probably missing out. And I hated the conversations where I'd find out that people were evaluating one of our competitors and then they'd move forward with them. And we're like, why didn't you consider us? So like, yeah, you guys kind of got there a bit late. I was like, no. Let's stop that. Let's try and get there first. And so this first to the party mindset was really important for us. It was like, we believe that we can drive the decision criteria and influence that within the sales process if we get there first. And if we wait too late, we're probably going to be like stack ranked really low and our ability to win probably will reduce. That's just one part of the thesis. I'm not going to give you the whole thing. But to answer your question, like the concept of in market is really moving away from this static territory based of list approach, where it's like, here's your territory, go after it, try and go bore the ocean, see how much of it you can get, to like this dynamic, I'd call it a dynamic territory, which is way smaller, which allows people to focus and prioritize where they're going to spend their efforts. And when we did that, our win rates were more than double actually. Particularly if you think about it from like BDRs, the way I did it like 7 or 8 years ago is BDRs would have this list. There were like 500-600 accounts that you're going to go after. And like you just kind of go through it one by one and then probably refresh to the top of the list, or the list would refresh. Now it's like, here are your 30 to 50 accounts that you're going to go after. These are the signals that they are showing to you. Here's why you're prioritizing them. And when you look at our work rate, so that's the accounts that you go after to the qualified pipelines that they're creating, percentages were a bit higher, not dramatically, but when you look at the actual close rate from qualified to close one, it was through the roof. And so I went to our CEO and I was like, I've seen this information. I've literally built 2 funnels of like cold versus in market. And when I look at the progression of deals, the speed and our win rate, it's more than double. And so we decided like, that is our strategy. That's what we're going to put everything behind.
Love it.
Really, really great way to look at it. I think Simon and I have the opportunity to speak to a lot of marketing teams, a lot of sales teams, customers of Sixth Sense, prospects, and so forth. And there's always sort of 2 themes that emerge, at least for me, when folks are trying to make a transition to, I don't want to say old school, because plenty of marketing teams are still doing lead gen and they're still successful to an extent and so forth. And you sit in a unique spot being a founder and a sales leader, because we're talking to customers that can't get sales to come along for the ride, so to speak, when we're talking to a marketing team. And then two, where you talked about the demo request or just MQLs and leads and all that, is sort of like the warm blanket for marketing teams, and getting them to rip it off or to make that transition is challenging. And then even up to the board level, I'd love to hear your perspective on, as you're talking to investors and your board and so forth, was this a transition that felt like a transition, or like, doing this for 5+ years at Reachdesk, was there a moment of like, okay, we have to change, or this sort of evolved? And if there was, how have you, I guess, taken the board along for the ride in that conversation?
Yeah, let's talk about taking the board along for the ride, because that's not an easy one. And look, I think most board members will acknowledge that they are not operators. Most of them are financiers, right? That's their role. Some of them have been, and that's quite rare. But look, to answer your question, it wasn't just like we've been doing this since day one, and we're still learning, right? We're still trying to perfect the art, but it was a transition. And I think the thing that drove it was the market conditions, if I'm honest with you. This is back in late 2022 is when we really started going harder at this. It was around efficiency. Like, how do we get our spend more efficient and more effective? I'm just being very transparent. That was a big driver of like, okay, we can't boil the ocean. There's not as much money to go around for what we're selling. So we've got to be quite precise with how we do things. The growth at all costs, times have gone, sadly. They were fun, but maybe a good thing that we are in the world. So I think that's what really spurred it on, to be honest with you. And so we had to go harder at it, and it became like the big thing. And it became a bit of a, dare I say, a bet, but I call them big things. I don't call them bets. Like, these are the big things that we need to do. I remember going into a board meeting and saying, this is what we're going to do. And I was kind of met with these blank stares of like, what did he just say in market? Does that mean anything to anyone? It's like, I'm not saying that they're morons or idiots or anything. Like, not at all. It's just, for many people, this is quite new, even if you're a go-to-market practitioner. But if you're at the board level, and not many of your portfolio companies are doing this is quite a new thing to have to understand. And you're measuring something different. You're measuring slightly different things in different ways. And I think I spoke for about 45 minutes. And the board meeting was probably in about 2 hours. So my 15, 20-minute slots tended something a lot longer. But I remember thinking, if I don't get this right now, this could be really, really tricky. And I can't remember exactly what I said, but it was really around that analogy of, let's start fishing in smaller pools with spears rather than try and boil the ocean. And that's my job, is to try and pick those pools. And that was the analogy that really resonated. But I had to say, these are the things we're going to measure now. And actually, I'm going to start putting marketing on having more focus on the close one revenue and what that's tied back to. And the initiatives, whereas before we were like, trade shows, let's do all of them. Let's spend loads on a wide spreads of digital campaigns, and let's just do loads. And now I had to retract it. And I realized I was saying, we're going to do way fewer things. I think the impact would be much greater.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? You hit on this in your first answer around just the way buyers buy has changed, right? One of your big bets for 2024 is, again, people will have known or should have seen your product before they're actually talking to a rep. Buyers are more savvy. And so the more you can capitalize on those signals and bring focus, both from a marketing perspective, by the way, and a sales perspective, right? Marketing focusing their dollars on accounts that they can truly move the needle with, warming them up to the point where sales is ready to jump in. I mean, it brings such an alignment across that go-to-market organization. So it makes sense in theory. I love that you're seeing obviously more than double win rates, but were there any sort of gotchas, or was there resistance initially from your internal teams, particularly sellers, where, oh, you're no longer working that list of 500. I'm making up a number, but here's 40.
I'd love to say, yeah, it was easy. Yeah, no, we had no problems. But that would be the biggest lie in the world. I suppose the way I think about it is like, what would I do differently if I did this again? I think I would have probably got sales leaders, like frontline managers, on board earlier with making decision on things like providers and the workflow. And I think the big thing I learned was like, you got to map out the workflow first and foremost. Get the workflow, the process nailed down. Try and test some of that if you can before you try and put the system in. I think we tried to do it the other way around. So that lost us a bit of time, but I think we got there in the end. My philosophy is that salespeople, AEs or AMs, that they should be doing this themselves too. There was a bit of we're waiting on marketing to generate inbounds and BDRs to like kind of tee it up for us. I think I underestimated that if you've had that DNA in your team and there isn't like much of an onus on salespeople, on sellers who are actually closing deals, to do more of this themselves, you're going to get pushback. So we kind of had to reset the expectations a little bit and say, by the way, this is your job. This is your job. Okay, if you don't do this, then maybe you're in the wrong place, but we expect you to do this now. But here's how it's going to benefit you. Here's the hypothesis. We believe that if you focus on these 15 to 20 accounts at a time and you do these things, and we will train you on it, this is what we expect to see. And we kind of just went, here it is, go get it. And we didn't do enough of the education. We didn't get enough buy-in early enough. We're there now. I think we lost a bit of time, and that was a big learning for me.
Again, that's another trend to change management. It's different for every company because some it's a transition, some it's, in my own experience, we literally like, okay, we're making this change, and we didn't flip a switch, but we made substantial changes in a very short period of time. We rolled it out to a BDR team first, and then we moved on to our AE team, and it was a smaller company, so it was a bit easier. But the change management in the people part of this thing is not to be underestimated at all. And I think we'll get spooked out and all sorts of different things. So I want to just switch topics and get a little geek out here on product tours. Actually, I remember even years and years ago, a screenshot tour was the cool thing, and you could click through and all that. And this is something we ourselves want to dig in more to as well, as I think using the product to sell, getting people exposed to the product. But between that and the way buyers are buying now, the availability of reviews and just like the way people are getting information now, it's almost like selling, the term of being a salesperson eventually is going to become like the term is facilitator more than anything else, right? Because you're sort of stripping away.
Yeah.
I don't say you're stripping away the sales part, because obviously there's so many intangibles of moving a deal forward. But like, how do you think the demo's exposure to product is changing the way sellers sell and where they sit and what's their role overall? Like, how do you see that changing?
Yeah, I think it's something else that I think I get into trouble with because I start to offend people here, but it's changed, right?
There's a theme here, by the way, Alex. You seem to get in trouble a lot. I'm just saying.
I think it's from growing up having a twin and me and my brother just getting in trouble a lot. So there were no rules, but there is a theme, and I think that's fair. When I started selling like nearly 15 years ago, people would barely look at your website. Perhaps you'd turn up with your big presentation. I had to get through like 30 slides. You didn't have like multiple stages and multiple people in person. There wasn't as much like social proof required. So it was like salespeople were, I think they did 80% of the job, and now I think they're doing 20% of it. So here's what I think. I think buyers are more worried about messing up. There's not this fear of messing out. There's a fear of messing up.
Yeah.
And they're worried that they're going to make the wrong decision, and it's probably going to cost them their job or their reputation, or it's not going to provide the ROI that they promised, and that's risky. And what salespeople therefore have to do is to validate the decision, because most buyers are going to show up and say, pretty sure I'm going to buy Reachdesk. I'm pretty sure. I just want to make sure, and I want to make sure I'm doing the due diligence. And so a seller's job is to be as helpful as possible, to be as transparent as possible, and to be expedient as possible with the information that they deliver to people so that their buyer is making the right decision. And sometimes that means that the salesperson has to turn them away and say, actually, you know what? We might not be a good fit for you. That builds the number one thing that buyers want, which is trust. Because if they trust you, they're far more likely to buy from you, right? So my advice to sales leaders and to sellers now is to build genuine trust with your buyers, give them the information, and only sell to those people that can actually buy from you who are a good fit for you. If you do that, you'll be successful. If you try and force it through, the always be closing kind of mentality and tactics, trying to just get to the deal, I don't think you're going to be successful, because first, it's going to be damaging for the brand. Word of mouth is so powerful. We talk about dark social a lot. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's my guidance at the moment, is like, be as helpful as possible, be as transparent as possible, follow up fast, but focus on building trust and giving people the truth. That's how you're going to be the most successful. And I'm seeing this in our team. I endeavor to hire people who are just transparent, who are just really, really helpful people, who are smart, who understand the industry and the actual pains that customers have, and see if they can help solve a problem. And if they can't, say, hey, I can't help you.
That's great guidance. And I think, especially in the SaaS world, you can close that initial deal, but you're just selling churn if it's not the right fit, if your customer isn't successful. And so a lot of what you just said goes back to understanding your ICP and really refining it and defining it. How do you, obviously in your role as co-founder and CRO, how do you go about defining the ICP? who's at the table when you're doing that? I imagine marketing has a voice, sales has a voice. It really is that overall go-to-market team. So just talk a little bit more about that.
I believe marketing owns your ideal customer profile. I don't believe it's anyone else. And the reason I say that is because I think marketing is now in a position where it can, they own 85% of the buyer journey and the rest of it actually, but 85% even before it's spoken to a salesperson. So marketing should be everywhere. If you're in a marketing team where you just like generating leads at the top of the funnel, that might be old school as I think you described it, Adam, but I agree with you. Marketing has the most visibility of what our buyers do. And if you feel like you don't have that, go looking for it. So I think marketing should own it. That's how we do it. That's how I've seen it work in many other businesses.
That's how we do it.
I've helped companies shift it away because it often sits with sales because they think they know best. They want to control it because they qualify opportunities, but they don't have as much information available to them. And it's okay if it's different, but sales needs to have a seat at the table. RevOps should be deeply entrenched and it should almost be like the impartial party because it can be friction between sales and marketing. They can, right? But they should be the ones who bring forward the data. And looking at things like not just like which deals are moving through our sales cycle the fastest with the highest close rate and ACV, but which customers are renewing. Like why? What are our top 20%? What are the behaviors they do? Why do they adopt the product more? And get that in there. And that's how I think about refining ICP. In fact, that's where I start before you even think about acquisition is the retention of customers because net retention, lifetime value and payback periods are the unit economics that drive success in this day and age far more than your top line growth. So it needs to be sales, it needs to be marketing. If you've got ops teams, they need to be there too. It doesn't need to be far more than that. You can start to bring in others like CEOs, but those are the fundamental components and players who should have a seat at the table.
And I think the only thing I'd add there is this is dynamic, right? The market is changing and you need to be refining it consistently. It's an iterative process. And so fully agree with you, right? Marketing owns that market with close collaboration between sales and CS in terms of a feedback loop, but just making sure that you're keeping a pulse on how it looks different, even quarter to quarter, but definitely year to year.
I try and do it quarter to quarter. But look, candidly, as a business, Reachdesk, when from 2018 to 2021, the growth at all cost days, we only sold to B2B software companies. I include like cyber, cloud, SaaS. Within that, that was our ICP. That is a big segment of the market that got heavily impacted for reasons we don't need to go into now. So we're like, hang on a second. Our ideal customer profile as we once knew it needs updating. We need to diversify a bit more. What are the other industry verticals that perhaps have not been as impacted? But if we'd ask sales, like who our ICP is, who should we be selling to now? It would probably be like, I don't know, just enterprise SaaS companies. What does that do to your TAM? It's like, whoa, okay, that's really small all of a sudden. Marketing were the ones saying, well, hang on a second. We've seen these signals from manufacturing, from logistics, from consultancy businesses, and we're seeing intent signals. We're seeing actually a bit more inbound, which we're rejecting because they weren't part of our ICP. We want to take a look at that. And off the back of that, because marketing was driving it, we built a squad that was literally designed to break into new verticals. I mean, I think I would have done this if I was just in sales. I'd be like, no. We know our customers. We know these guys. This is who we're going to keep selling to. Marketing were the ones going, yeah, but look over here. And RevOps then started digging into the data. And now we're selling to like 3 other industry verticals that we weren't selling to before. And we're only selling to the ones that are in market. So it's not as risky. Very, very different exercise. So our ICP has now evolved tremendously because of that.
Of those verticals now, are there any that when you found them, the data said, well, we should be over here. You saw the amount where you, wow, would have like looking at it now, like I would have never thought that our product was a fit in this particular vertical. And now you're closing deals regularly or anything really crazy or interesting that stands out?
I thought that manufacturing was like really, really old school. The reason why SaaS companies were buying Reachdesk like there was no tomorrow is because I feel like they have a level of maturity of adopting technology and processes and have built businesses in a different way that it just made more sense. One of the things that we look at is like technographics. Once we started spotting the technographics of like, okay, so with Reachdesk, we integrate with tools like SalesLoft, Outreach, with you guys, 6 Sense, with HubSpot, Marketo. We started seeing a surge in like intent data as well as technographics. And I was like, hang on a second. Why are manufacturing companies buying sales engagement platforms and investing in ABM? What's going on there? I thought they were sort of in the dark ages, like decades behind the pack. And actually what I've learned is that there's been a real heightened state of maturity there. And actually people are hiring people that have been in B2B SaaS to go and run manufacturing sales teams because they're trying to upgrade. So I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. This is like totally new and against what I believed that industry was at in terms of its stakes. I thought it was always just going to be in this old school industry. And actually it's had a digital transformation that's fueled it. It's because guess what? It's done really, really well over the past couple of years and there's more money in it. Next thing I know, I'm like, hey, let's invest more of our time there. And it's working as well. It's working really well. I remember one of our BDRs, when we put them on in this squad, they were like, hey, I've had 5 times as many connect calls with a manufacturing company as I've had with a SaaS company. All right, it's because the CMO of the SaaS company has been cold called by everyone and has got everything on their phone to try and block it out. The manufacturing guys are like, hey, yeah, we'll speak. And so it's actually made it easier for us.
We have a question that we like to ask every guest, and it's, what is the most ridiculous thing you've ever had to do in your career? Either been asked to do, forced to do, and it could be something negative or it could be something positive. We've gotten some stories around sunsetting a product in 15 days to 100 customers, to smuggling swag across borders. What kind of stands out in your mind is like, it was wild and crazy and maybe had a positive outcome or maybe had a negative outcome?
It's a very good question. I love that, by the way. I think the craziest thing I've ever had to do in my career is start a company as a founder, but maybe let's not talk about that.
That's fair.
I think building in stealth mode, if I'm honest with you. The first 2 years of our business, no one knew what we were doing. Maybe it's not a crazy thing in and of itself, but there are 2 parts to it. At the beginning, I said, right, I'm going to build a business and I want it to be born account-based. Right, we're not going to do loads of branding and like drive organic traffic or anything like that. Everything's going to be account-based from day one. And here's our ICP. And they're like, we don't have any customers. I remember my 3 founders been like, what? Like, how do you know? I was like, because I know. All right. And we're going to build these products that are specifically designed for account-based marketers and for these types of personas. They're like, we haven't even interviewed. I could see like them starting to be fearful of like, why did we ask this guy to start this company with us? Because like, we're going to do an account-based from day one. Because normally what you do as a founder is like, you try and build every hack to try and not spend money and build as much buzz as possible. And it's like, no. Here's the best part. We're going to do it in stealth mode. We don't want anyone to know we really exist. And then we're going to explode. Now, like, oh my God, what are you thinking? But actually, I think it worked because about a year and a half in, when we really started putting stuff out there, people were like, where did you come from? And I was like, oh yeah, we've been doing this and we're in like 5 million in ARR. They were like, what? Then how long? And like 2 years from like 0, no product to like 5 million. It sounds nothing now, it's bigger business and I'm sure you guys are far bigger, but it's like that stealth account base. Let's do it very differently, very intentionally without spending too much and really like backing ourselves on who we're going to be selling to before product market fit was like a bit nerve wracking. And I remember them saying, you do realize if this doesn't work, it's your fault. I was like,
no pressure there. Wow. Yeah. I've done the 0 to 15 journey and I could not imagine, at least on the first part, the stealth. I don't know, like do all this, but don't tell anyone or keep it quiet. That actually gives me a little bit of anxiety even now, just thinking about it. So that's a really good answer. So building in stealth. I like that.
Thanks so much, Alex. Great conversation. I feel what I'm taking away from this is the conviction and placing big bets and sticking towards them and making it happen. So very cool stuff. Thank you.
Great perspective too, right? That's not something you see very often, right? You get the founder, you get the CRO hat, you got a great marketing hat. You wear a lot of hats, but you wear them well. So really appreciate the insights.
Oh, I appreciate it. I've loved this a lot, guys. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it is a bit unconventional because usually you get the founder who wants to be the CEO, but I'm obsessed with sales and marketing. Those are the 2 hats I will always wear. But I've loved being on this. Thank you for pushing me on some of this stuff. You've also made me realize that I probably get into more trouble than I should do.
Thanks. Take care.
Thanks. You've been listening to Revenue Makers.
Do you have a revenue project you were asked to execute that had wild success? Share your story with us at sixthsense.com/revenue. We might just ask you to come on the show.
And if you don't want to miss the next episode, be sure to follow along on your favorite podcast app.